Part of growing, working in many different facilities, means that you do indeed pick up many, many different techniques. And I think there's so many different ways of doing the same thing in coloring and Resolve and Baselight and others. Some people use curve grade, some people are using film grades, some people are using printer points, but if you look at it, no two colorists are using the same box alike.
Senior Colorist Bob Festa joins me on this episode of the Colorist Podcast. Bob Festa has colored some of the most iconic music videos and national commercials. Companies like Coca-Cola, Levi's, American Express, McDonalds, and IBM come back to his suite again and again. In a career that spans over 30 years, he has completed over 20,000 spots. He continues to color today, working on the shows The Runaways and The Last Ship. He is a recipient of daVinci's Master Colorist Award and Commercial Colorist of the Year. Bob has held positions as a senior colorist at Company 3, RIOT Santa Monica, Hollywood Digital, and Encore. And he also ran his own facility, New Hat. He's worked with daVinci systems since its start, and even helped drive some of the features we use today. Bob continues to be a mentor to aspiring colorists. He shares his skills, experience, and knowledge to the next generation of artists. In this podcast, we talk about how to avoid burnout and have a long career as a colorist, comparing long and short form grading, the inspiration of film, and why some colorists still use printer points, and the most abused technique in color grading. And now, here's Bob Festa. Well, thanks, Bob, for joining me on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. I've watched what you've been doing in the community, and I think you're doing a great thing, and I'm glad you've selected to speak with me. I'm probably one of the more senior members in our community, with 30 plus years of color experience. So hopefully I can lend a couple of interesting anecdotes and insights to the community at large, because quite frankly, mentoring has been really, really important to me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you making the time. So doing this podcast, almost every colorist I've interviewed said that they didn't intend on being a colorist. So how exactly did you get your start? Well,
I'm a failed editor, of course. Early on, I was working in the Laserdisc mastering, which of course went on to become, DVDs. But I was a trained online editor, trained in Santa Clara, California at CMX, did some Ampex training on effects devices. And quite frankly, I just thought there was very little room for opportunity in kind of the online conforming environment at the time. So I happened to stumble into this thing called telecine, and I found an ad for a telecine operator. And although I wasn't really familiar with the actual craft itself, I had supervised probably 100 sessions. So I waltzed in and somebody gave me an opportunity, and the rest is history.
I guess this number is probably out of date by now, but you've worked on over 20,000 spots. And with any job in post, there's a huge burnout factor. So what's the key to having a long career doing color?
Well, look, I think that really brings up this whole thing of aging gracefully in color. And quite truthfully, when I started off, and even today, there's no one in front of my generation that I could look to and point to and say, hey, there's a great role model. There's somebody who, sat in the chair his entire life, colored his entire life, had a beautiful, rewarding career, great family, was able to do great things. So there's really no leadership in front of me anyway, as far as, dictating the pace and the position and, where to go with this. But anyway, in 30 plus years of doing this, I really specialized initially in the short form. Probably did about 20,000 commercials to date, hundreds of seminal music videos, going all the way back to a half a dozen Michael Jackson videos and Madonna videos, even up to today. But there's a certain something that happens. I still really can't explain it. But the minute as a colorist, when you sit in that chair and it starts to get warm, you have to turn around to your client and start improvising. And the only thing I can really relate it to is I play a little bit of music, but it's like improvising in jazz. You've got to sit down, look at what you've got to work with, interact with your clients in a meaningful way, and then contribute, really put up. And there's something about that still leads me to the chair every day.
Yeah, it is one of the most interactive jobs, whether we're talking about color or mixing or any of that stuff. We have to get our clients involved in the session. Is there anything that you do to keep it flowing? Like there's sometimes there are gaps or problems in a session, but how do you keep that vibe going?
Let me tell you about my process. Generally, the first thing when I work with somebody new or even an existing client, I have them sit down at the client console. And opposed to me being in front of them in the studio, which is a traditional layout, I actually go back behind them and I sit on the couch, on the client couch. And I kind of flip the relationship a little bit. And I ask them about their hopes, and their dreams, and their expectations for the piece we're going to be working on, whether it's a 30-second spot, a doc, a TV show, or a clip. It really kind of flips the egg where it kind of puts them in the leadership position and puts me back in a collaboration position. So we might talk about some of the stuff on the web they liked. Maybe they brought in a piece of print they're really fond of. Needless to say, we'll talk about some of the general ideas as far as where we want to push this. Is it going to be beauty? Is it going to be dirty? I get some pretty general ideas about that. Kind of talk to them, let them know that I'm going to show them so many things their head is going to spin off. And then I head down into the pit and into my chair. And the first thing I do is I whip up 9 quick looks just to get a broad stroke and a theme about what we just talked about. And I had a lot of basslight experience, so I'm very familiar with show versions, which is a great, great tool. So I would load 9 different things up into the gallery and then show them those 9 things. Now, the Resolve doesn't really do that natively, but I do have a method where I can actually show 9 different gallery grades or gallery stills up using the split screen feature. But anyway, once you show somebody 9 different things straight up on the first thing we talked about, you put those 9 cubes up there and you push play, you can walk away for 20 minutes and let these guys just completely take in what you've just shown them. And even though some of the differences might be very, very minute and minuscule, maybe one slightly warmer, maybe one slightly cooler, once you show somebody 9 different exposures, it's just fantastic. You've got them. They're a client for life.
What's really interesting about what you said just now was you didn't ask them, what is it supposed to look like? And you're really more coming at it from the perspective of conceptually, what are you trying to say? Which I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes fall into that trap where we say, what do you want it to look like rather than what are you trying to say?
Yeah, because quite frankly, that's what we're doing, right? We're collaborating and contributing. Something else I wanted to speak about was just the fleeting nature of your client base. And granted, you and I had just had a great session. These people left smiling. You know what? Today's client is going to be in tomorrow's dead file because we all know the editors, the editorial companies, directors, the production companies. They've got the lifespan of a day-old loaf of bread. Today's hot new thing is, tomorrow's footnote.
Do you also find that you work with a lot of people that were doing commercials or music videos and they go on to bigger and better things? Does it work the same way where, say, somebody who was just getting their footing, did they go on to bigger and better things and say, hey, I worked with Bob and he was awesome, and they take you along with them?
I think it generally works in a different fashion where they go into the stock market.
Or real estate.
So, yeah, I'm not really sure that that works out so well. Beyond that, working for a big box organization, really allows you to be exposed to all different types of opportunity, whether you're working in the short form or the long form, episodic TV, feature films, docs. You have to look today. There's billions of dollars being spent between Netflix, Apple, Hulu. Quite frankly, with the advent of HDR, there's a whole new mastering revenue stream, which is really exciting to me. Part of working for these big box companies, and I don't mean that derogatorily, but certainly affords you the opportunity, to stick your nose in places where maybe you wouldn't be exposed to if you were in a smaller mom and pop shop, or if you were, working in your home studio. You certainly wouldn't be able to take advantage of this. So, much like Wayne Gretzky used to say, I always like to skate to where the puck is going. And right now I'm doing a lot of work in HDR. And quite frankly, the workflow in HDR is still in a very, very primitive fashion. And it's still growing. That excites me. But beyond that, as I said, it's a huge new revenue stream, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, you've been through all of these changes through your career when you go from SD to HD to 4K, film to digital, stereo. You've seen all of these changes happen. And so how is this change that we're getting to HDR, how is that different from how things happened in the past?
Ironically enough, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, if you look at even when we, as recently as first started grading HD, 709 used to be a clumsy process. And data, same thing. I mean, working with data used to be horribly clumsy. And HDR right now, it's still in kind of the baby steps. Just FYI, I work in a studio that has HDR mastering pipeline. I master on a Pulsar at 4,000 nits. Simultaneously, I also master on an X300 at 1,000 nits. And then we also keep a 709 display up all the time at 100-ish nits. So there you've got 3 different displays, 3 different technologies, all in the bay at the same time. And quite frankly, it sounds incredibly clumsy, but you really do need to see, your highest dynamic range opportunity as well as your lowest common denominator, which is just a 709 display. Just being able to master those all simultaneously, working through Dolby's, CMU, their content mapping unit. There's a lot of baby steps right now that are a little clumsy that really takes the craft to more of a, there's a lot of foundational work and a lot of content propping you've got to do just to kind of get this ball of beauty in a nice area where you can actually start to be creative. So just FYI, on an hour episodic TV show, I probably spend a full day just Dolby color analyzing the timeline, getting everything where I like it, getting a good base grade. Just the layup alone is probably a full day.
We've seen the price of these color systems drop dramatically. I mean, we're looking at a base light now for $995 and Resolve for $299. Do you think that this has had a positive or a negative impact on the community?
Well, look, if you look at the what's happened in the commercial community, as I said, I spent about 30 years working in the commercial environment. And let's see, what killed the commercial business? Granted, it still goes on, but it's not as healthy as it was. What killed the commercial business? It wasn't the lack of dailies. It wasn't the fact that music videos are now $1,000 a pop all up. It wasn't even the death of film. I really think what spelled the death to the commercial short form was when software was virtually given away for free and everybody and their mother could bring it in-house and give it a shot. And once the clients bought it once, because, Joey in the mailroom gave it a crack, it was just a matter of time before it happened every time. So I find the A-grade commercials are still viable, happening, and still fun to work on. But all the B, C, D-grade work, that we used to use as, bread and butter is all gone. And that's dailies to running footage to just the smallest inconsequential stuff is now gone.
You spent many of these years coloring these commercials too, but now recently you've done more episodic TV like The Last Ship and the upcoming show The Runaways on Hulu, which looks really cool. Is your approach different on longer form projects than the short form?
The approach in episodic, generally I'm working with DPs I know from other opportunities, whether they're commercials or generally commercials, crossover DPs. So you still have that relationship with directors of photography. And I think that's probably the pivot element right there. We still have the communication. You still have the same way of working. I still love to show people 9 different things, even on the most, pedestrian TV shot. So yeah, I don't think anything really changes dramatically, truth be told. You're still collaborating.
So with these DPs and directors that you've worked with over the years, did that collaboration with them change the way you graded, or did it help grow you or see things in different ways?
I think working with different people certainly avails you to their, to their input and to what they like. I know certain DPs like it darker, certain DPs like it to breathe a little bit more. You certainly learn a certain DP's opportunity. But I think, part of growing, working in many different facilities, means that you do indeed pick up many, many different techniques. I like to think of color, there's a parable of blind men trying to describe an elephant. And I think there's so many different ways of doing the same thing in coloring and Resolve and Baselight and others. Some people use curve grade. Some people are using film grades. Some people are using printer points. But if you look at it, no 2 colorists are using the same box alike. And I think having the opportunity of working at many, many different facilities and working at a big organization means that you get to collaborate with other colorists and new techniques. Right now, as you said, I'm working on a couple of TV shows that are under my banner, but I also get the opportunity to, support other people whenever possible. And it's just so great because other people have shown me, a guy who's been doing this for 30 plus years, great ways to simplify my thoughts and my techniques. I think if nothing else, I've also shown other people, how to, maybe smooth out their big, complex, open effects grades or whatever. So part of that is kind of, just collaborating with other colorists, which I think a lot of people don't get to do. But quite frankly, that's a huge, huge opportunity that I'm still reaping the benefit of, at the peak of my career, honestly.
Since you did bring up printer points and printer lights, it seems like it's such an old concept to use in grading, but a lot of big colorists still use it, like the Peter Doyles of the world, and Steve Scott uses it as well. Why do you think a tool like this has stuck around for so many years?
I'm not sure. Quite frankly, I think, and this is just my own personal belief, I really think the best colorists kind of grew up in film. They understood the magic properties of the curves. And I think until you experience that, and not to take anything away from today's young people who don't know how many frames are in a foot of film, it's completely irrelevant at this point. But there's certain people who live through film and they understand exactly the curve and exactly the look and exactly the settled type of thing they're after. And quite frankly, before we started using LUTs, that was really an effort to be able to make your image look film-like. And the only way you could do that, if you didn't have a LUT to work with, was to, actually kind of recreate what you knew. How did you remember reversal film looking? How did you remember 5294? How did you remember print release looking? And you really had to emulate that in the back of your head and constantly go back and forth. So that's my thought, is people still using printer points or, still using some of the filmic curves, that they loved and used.
These days, a colorist, part of their job is actually new business development. Like before, we didn't really have to worry about finding clients. They usually just came to us. I always thought I was just the guy in the dark room for a long time. But now part of the job is getting out and meeting people and attracting them to the business. Have you had that feeling as well?
Well, look, business development, whether you're at a big or a small company, you still need more than what we call suite sales. You still need to do more than just turn the trick in the studio. As I said, tomorrow's great client is going to be in tomorrow's dustbin. So for, every 2 new clients you've gained, tomorrow you're going to lose 2. So it's kind of a constant thing. And quite frankly, you've got to be prepared to pivot. Like I said, I've seen the death of film. You've got to be able to pivot and move on that in a minute. And whether that means the short form market is softer in your neighborhood, well, then you better pivot to the long form market. There's so many different tools that every colorist has to adopt to, social media, going to ASC award shows, going to demos, It's all a matter of what works for you in your market, but you should definitely huddle up with today's client because tomorrow that's going to be a dead business line.
So one of my favorite quotes of yours is, "I'm one of the original architects of the most abused techniques in color grading."
That's good. I like that.
When I read that, I said there has got to be a story behind this. So this was in reference to a vignette, a darkened vignette around the whole image. What's the story behind that?
Quite frankly, the vignette, the 4-corner pinch, the fall off, it goes by many different names. But clearly the most abused technique in modern color, I think. Some are obviously quite obvious, like, lens hood refractions. Others are much, much softer. And I think the reason this technique has had such legs is because it's really indecipherable if done well. And, with the advent of multiple windows, multiple shapes, we've really recreated the traditional photographic darkroom dodge and burn. And I think the vignette is actually a huge part of that. You can't really point to it and say, look, we brought up this guy's face and we knocked down this background. If done well, you can't see it. And it probably is the most abused technique we use. But, shaping and 3-dimensionality in a shot, it's huge, huge. And I still subscribe to it every day.
I don't know if many people realize this too, but you were partially responsible too for the power grade in Resolve. You ended up giving some of that feedback to daVinci that we needed something like that.
The kids that set up my project still relabel it Festa grade. It's very clever. I got to tell you, years ago when daVinci was in the 2K world and software was very, very stagnant back then. Today things are changing so dramatically fast. It's fantastic. But you got to remember, back in the 2K era, we were spending $400,000 for software that didn't change for years, not a single feature. So I was very vocal about it on the interwebs, And a lot of people didn't think that was very thoughtful of me, but quite frankly, look what's happened. I mean, now this product has really gotten some legs and taken off, which is great. But I was very, very much involved in, participating in the TIG and other early user groups to try to get some action and get some change happening. And I remember hearing from the guys at daVinci in Florida at the time basically saying, Jesus, is this guy Festa? Is he a fly on the wall? How does he know what we're talking about? So, yeah, I think a lot of those original ideas were great, but I just took those as being collaborative tools. When you're working with a room full of people, I mean, really what you want is to be able to, what I call grade once, show many. So basically, I want to balance a shot and then be able to ripple stuff on top of it, whether that's automated or not. I want to be able to show many, many, many different steps without doing a lot of heavy lifting. In a perfect world, you're all familiar with the new LUT viewer that's available on the Mac platform. Well, I work on Linux, and, quite frankly, I don't have the opportunity to scrub through my LUTs and really pick the one I like. And, right-clicking on a node and going to a 3D LUT viewer, finding your user, rippling through your collection of LUTs, which I probably have hundreds, it's a very, very clumsy process. But I want to show every one of those to my clients. So I think the Power Grade was kind of the same principle, is that I really wanted to show pages of stuff, what they call the Lightbox now, or Power Grades, or even multiple pages of stills. You want to be able to output that and keep your clients engaged. You want to show them the previous 3 shots and the next 3 shots. You want to show them, the original version and after. You want to show them 9 different gallery grades that you created. But all of this, I want to be able to automate. You know what? You should have your top 8 LUTs that you love. They should be in a directory, Josh's favorites. You want to be able to grade once, and then with your client, give them their favorite 9 looks in addition to that, automated. So basically, my concept is grade once, show many. So in your opinion, what tools do we still need? What hasn't really been invented yet? Oh, geez. I got to tell you that today's secondary keying is still so primitive to some of the stuff we've used earlier. If you looked at Pandora's DCC, or if you look at Encore's Prism systems, granted, some of those were in the analog domain, which were much easier to hide some of the sloppy artifacts. But even in today's digital world, God, I can't pull a key like I used to pull in 1990, which is really kind of embarrassing at this date. I don't know. Like I said, I'm totally into collaboration. I want to show my clients moving screens all the time. So whatever people can do to make my output easier would be fantastic. We mentioned the Lightbox just a minute ago, and quite frankly, if you put the Lightbox up on your program monitor, it looks like an 8-bit, Super Mario game. It's horrible quality. Yeah. I'm embarrassed to show that to clients, but a lot of times I need to put that up and, find out where the shot is. So you've been awarded with the daVinci Master Colorist Award and Commercial Colorist of the Year, but why do you think there isn't an Oscar or Emmy category for colorists yet? Better yet, why are the colorists listed behind the greenskeepers? And craft service. That's a good question. I think it's kind of a black art that a lot of people still don't understand. I mean, I work with people, even DPs today, who are still, asking, oh, what's that? What is all that tracking going on? It's like, well, yeah, we've had this for a few years. And I think that just points to the fact that there's a lot of, not ignorance, but a lot of people aren't aware of the tools and techniques that we use to contribute to a feature film, a TV show, or a commercial. It is an unknown black art, and, we're kind of magicians. Nobody can point to us on set and say, hey, that's what he's doing. You recently became a member of the Color Society International, and I'm a member as well. And full disclosure, they're sponsoring this podcast as well. But what convinced you to join? Maybe just to support the concepts that we're just talking about, more recognition for the colorist. Really, that's about it. I don't anticipate, getting any additional work out of this, but I just think with a professional organization, no secret, it's tax deductible. I don't know. I guess I just want to see a higher visibility for my craft, even though I've kind of lived the life and done it all. But, we should be recognized. If you were starting as a colorist today, what advice would you give yourself? Wow. Unfortunately, people starting off today really don't get a chance to study at the heels of a master. Although I didn't get to do that either. I did train and mentor, dozens of people. As an aside, back in the golden years, we had a thing called the Festa tree. And those were all the assists who'd gone on to graduate and become colorists on their own. And I guarantee you there's 20 people out there today who are making, six figures because they worked with me, on my right side as an assist and got to, study. That doesn't happen anymore. There's no reason to have an assist with you to help sling film or to do I/O or, there's just no reason to have an assist by you. And the financial realities don't dictate that, which is really a crime because as somebody starting off today, there's really nothing you can do but, saunter up to a company you think you like and, start at the bottom, unfortunately, client service, mailroom, vault, something, and then just kind of hopefully work your way into maybe doing a late night job somewhere or getting a third shift type thing. It's really kind of sad, truth be told.
I mean, it does kind of feed into what we talked about earlier, too, is that nobody in our day decided that they directly wanted to become a colorist. At this point, somebody could be in college and decide, hey, that's the career path that I want and what I could strive towards, but it's not like an unknown thing. And you can still download a version of Resolve and at least learn the software, before you couldn't even get into a room to see what the software was.
Yes, but I think it's like we talked about, until you've actually worked elbow to elbow with another colorist on another show, and you start to really exchange some techniques that are completely unspoken. I mean, there's shortcuts that, nobody but the select, 20 of us at the top of our field really know about. And like I said, we all do these shortcuts in a completely different fashion. So, yeah, I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you making the time, Bob. It's been really great to talk to you. Is there anything that you'd like to plug or any...
No, but I'll tell you what, I really like to talk with other colorists and find out, how do they magically, come up with something when it's dropped down in their lap. And I think all of us have different ideas. We all talk to clients, find out what they want, what their hopes are, what their dreams are, as I said. But honestly, what is that magic moment that happens when you're staring into a blank canvas? You're looking at a flat, you're probably looking at a log sea, right? Nothing but a cloudy, atmospheric, flat marshmallow. What do you look at? What do you see? What are the signposts? And I really think it's totally dictated by each of our individual backgrounds that makes us different people as colorists. I look into in the old days it'd be a piece of film, but I look into a log sea and I'm looking for the benchmarks, the signposts, the handles. What are the things that I want to bring to life? After talking with the client, what are the things that I can contribute? What can I bring forward? What can I push back? What kind of spin can we put on this? What's the emotion of the shot? And I think that's what makes every colorist different, is their background, is their field of experience, it is what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I really appreciate you making the time. Thank you very much.
All right, Josh, great job. Keep it up. Pleasure talking to you.